one thing I do love about myself is that I will do things almost instinctually that I'll later learn why I was doing in the first place and give me a better understanding of why I do it. And I actually do believe that sort of connection is meant for me to give to y'all. And speaking on that, one of the thing I realized I was doing the entire time was understanding that I was getting spirituality mixed up, but I eventually sorted it out without trying to know. And that was the understanding that how you view spirituality, how a lot of people view spirituality is a little messed up, but really what it is that it's spiritual growth. But that spiritual growth actually starts with this personal growth. So working through your traumas, becoming a better person, becoming kinder, becoming wiser, becoming more resilient. And as you max these things out, as you sort of max out your human, you get to a point where you can be no better of a person. You can be no more saint-like. You can be no more competent. You can be no more masterful at a craft or in relationships or in business. And then the spiritual journey is releasing it all, giving it all up. But what happens is that people want to skip that and they go straight to enlightenment. Enlightenment now. And what ends up happening is, well, typically they actually go through the pathways anyway. They just don't necessarily follow a set path, right? You're already developing. Because sure, it is you finding your true self, which never needed to grow and evolve and change. It was already perfect. But the encasing of the human ego that you have has to be developed, ripened, and then pulled back. And the actual spirituality is when you pull it back, but you have to be ripe first. Most people like to not be ripe and they do the spiritual stuff and they end up harming themselves or becoming deluded. Or really what happens is they end up blocking, stopping right there, thinking they've been enlightened, and really they just stay at a specific area level. But the thing about me is I was getting that confused with reality creation, or what we call manifestation, which doesn't really need personal or spiritual growth. You don't have to develop spiritually to create manifesting. You don't. But typically, it takes less work if you have. Because here's the thing. You already create your reality, right? If you already think and you already feel, then you already have a vibration. You already magnetize stuff to you, so the life around you is created. Really what you're doing when you start to reality create is when you do it consciously, when you are intentful. But even that practice puts you a little bit up on the scale of consciousness, or of all, as you have personal growth. You have to do a little bit of personal growth to be able to effectively create your reality. The people who are really good at doing it have a decent amount of personal growth, which just means they take responsibility for themselves. They don't put blame. They don't fall into victimization. Because they realize everything that happens to them is through them. Now, they're not necessarily enlightened. They're not necessarily saints, but they're higher up on the scale than most people. Most people who don't even believe in it, right? And the thing about it is that if you do enough personal growth, you end up creating reality anyway, the way you want it. Why? Is because you typically have a lot of self-effort. Typically, when you're just going the personal route method, where you're doing a lot of willpower, you're learning how to work with yourself, you have to heal on some level, right? You have to become honest with where you're at, which means you have to be open about how you repressed your feelings and how you were traumatized and all the different doubts that you come across. So you still run into the same things. And as such a person grow, you typically state change. You're more calm, right? You're more positive about the world because you feel. I definitely lost my point, but I'll start back where I found it. Personal growth, reality creation. If you start to do more personal growth, if you start to go on the spiritual path, or just evolve as a person, right? You start to change, you become better. You're using your will, you're using your focus, you're using your thoughts, you're working with your emotions, because you have to do that to grow. There's no other way out of that. And because of that, you'll see life start to change around you, but if you're not necessarily spiritual or metaphysical, you'll see that as just, well, I changed my life, so my life changed. Not knowing that, yes, you changed your life, but you were changing a lot of stuff internally. And of course, you made different decisions. Of course, you made different places, but those are a part of the point. And your reality changes for that. So you could actually never look up manifestation techniques or how to reality create, and just personally grow, spiritually grow. And eventually, because you're vibrating differently, right? You're believing different things. You're happier, typically. You're more calm. You're more patient. You're less reactive. By the definition of growing personally, emotionally maturing, things around you is going to change. Anyway, what I've learned and what I've started to do is learn how to hold both. Hold on. What I've learned is to do both. So, if I want something in particular, because I'm gonna want stuff, I live in a world, and I think this more importantly works if you are still going to be in the world while you develop personally or spiritually. Right? If you're gonna go off into the cabin, into the cave, you don't need reality creation. That has nothing. That does you really nothing. But if you are going to be in the world, either that is spiritual secret, or if you're going to be in the world and you're going to learn manifestation, having these two actually work together. And I think for a while I used to think they butt heads, because when you go into personal growth, especially from a spiritual perspective, reality creation is seen as a distraction, as not the point of being attached to samsara. And a lot of times in reality creation, it's like, okay, the spiritual mumbo jumbo won't really help you. And I think what that is because, of course, you can get really good at manifesting, reality creating, and not necessarily evolve your spirit or get closer to the sort of end game, enlightenment, end game, or get out of here, whatever you want to say, leave the matrix. You can still be very stuck in the matrix, but be really good at manifesting. At the same time, you can become very spiritual, but not necessarily realize how your thoughts and emotions create your reality, and be stuck on certain levels. And I think they're both, and that's what I've learned to do both. Because on one hand, progressing spiritually will help you manifest faster, because you're going to have to, when you progress, become calmer, become less reactive, be more focused on your thoughts, be more aware, meditate more, be more observant, have better control over yourself and your inner world, and therefore naturally in the outer world will evolve. And at the same time, you need willpower, you need some level of calm, you need some level of thing to do the reality creation anyway, and you'll realize when that becomes faster that you'll want to do it anyway. Basically, what happens is you'll create your reality, you'll manifest quote unquote something, or you'll really set an intention for something to happen, and it'll happen at whatever time. What are you gonna do to fill the time? You finally realize that you kind of don't want to do the same old. Not necessarily because it'll ruin your manifestation. The only thing that'll ruin your manifestation is letting ideas and distractions come through, which of course, and you as you see that you want to do more personal growth to be able to resist limiting beliefs, which again, personal growth does that. If you do personal growth, you are working through those. And so it's like two wings. I'd say it's two wings that is needed to fly. And I think that's sort of what a lot of us came down here for. Now that I contemplate it, like a lot of us did one or the other and had to come back because we only did one. Like if you're really good at the spiritual, like inner work stuff, but you're not really trying to reality create, and not for yourself, but for the benefit of society, right? You're leaving the society behind. You're probably back here down to work on that. And if you get really good at the manifestation stuff, but you weren't going for any higher things, it was always just material partners, worldly things, quote unquote, which aren't bad, but you've never seen for higher stuff, higher realms, higher qualities like love, kindness, appreciation, joy. If you didn't achieve those, because you don't necessarily need those to manifest, then you're down here to do that. But you're not down here, and some people are just learning. So typically, for people who just now getting spirituality, they're gonna get one or the other, and they're gonna be really focused on that, and they're probably gonna get really good at that. I have an idea, an opinion, that maybe if you're struggling with one or the other, it might be because you were supposed to do both, because you're down here to sort of finish up any loose ends, and that's why, in my opinion, doing both makes the most sense. But yeah, peace.